Do you dread playing the same thing every family game night? Are you tired of dusting off those old boxes just to get a semblance of normalcy? Do you ever think there's more to life than just life? Well, if you said yes to any of those things, then this video's for you. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 board games that I think are better than the OGs, and I try to keep my suggestions fairly recent so that when you go into your local game store, you'll know what to look for. So if you want to know which board games are strictly better than the classics, then might I suggest? Hi, I'm Alex from Might I Suggest a Game, a channel devoted to helping you find your perfect board game. And today, like I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about 7 board games that are better than the classics. The funny thing about this video is it really is the premise that I started this channel on. I mean, I kept playing these board games and saying, why do people play Monopoly when this exists? And so I decided to make a channel where I give board game recommendations and the rest is history. So I'm getting back to my roots and I'm doing 7 more recommendations that are fairly recent that I think you're going to enjoy. But of course, there are more than 7 classic games, so if I didn't hit your favorite classic game, make sure to drop it below in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit subscribe and that little bell button so you can get notified when I post new content. Anyways, I'm excited to stir the pot a little with these recommendations, so let's get into it. Will one of these classic game replacements be the perfect game for you? Let's find out, shall we? Alright, we're going to start by talking a little bit about life. That is, the game of life, of course. Now, I think we can all agree that this game is a little outdated. But also, I think in 2025, people's motivations have changed. I don't know a ton of people whose goal is to just meet their end with the most money. Or at least I'm not friends with them. So let me recommend another life simulator game that's updated for the modern era and that has better motivations altogether. It's Adulthood. Adulthood is a nice and easy life simulator game for 1 to 4 players from Brotherwise Games. And what I love about it is that instead of being all about the money and your career and everything, in this game you'll have to balance happiness and impact instead. And I think that's both more thematic and more aligned to my own values personally. In the game, you'll be placing your time tokens on your board to decide what you're going to be spending your time on. Are you going to advance in your career? Are you going to work on your own personal wellness? Are you going to participate in community activities? Whatever you choose, each of them has pros and cons, but really what you're trying to do is balance these 2 tracks, because the game will end as soon as one person's tracks meet. You could certainly be hedonistic and go all in on happiness, or you could be a workaholic and go all in on impact, but usually the best strategy is to find somewhere to meet in the middle. During the game, you're going to be drafting these adulthood cards that are going to give you new experiences, while also receiving these random life event cards that might throw you for a loop, just like in real life. You can try to build out a life that is similar to the one you're living in real life, or you could go completely different and build out a dream life that you've always wanted to live. I think an underrated part of this game is actually the storytelling bit, where at the end of the game you can see all of the experiences and all of the values that you had and tell a fun story with the character that you created. Adulthood is really easy to pick up. There's not a ton of rules, but I think there's a surprising amount of strategy that goes along with the storytelling in the game that makes this one super fun to get to the table. Plus, they just came out with the Pet Projects expansion, which adds in new careers and also pets that you can have. And we all know that pets make everything better. So if you're tired of just spinning that spinner and randomly moving along the board, and you want to have a more meaningful life simulator experience so that maybe you can get some inspiration on what to do in your own life, then might I suggest Adulthood. Alright, the next one we're going to talk about is a classic, and I put that in quotation marks because if you've been around my channel long enough, you know how I feel about this game. It's Catan. Now, Catan is a really interesting one because there's lots of different mechanics in it, so there's lots of games that I can recommend to replace it depending on whether you like the route building, or the resource collection, or the negotiation. But I played a game recently where I thought, you know, if you like Catan but you prefer being in space, then I think this one is really going to click for you, and that game is For All Mankind. For All Mankind is a space colonization game for 1 to 4 players from Bad Cat Media, and while I don't think it introduces anything new from a mechanics perspective, I do think that it feels familiar enough to Catan that it will capture that demographic really well. Now, in For All Mankind, you're going to be exploring the different planets of the solar system, building colonies to collect resources from them, and then using those resources to scheme and potentially sabotage your opponents. Just like in Catan, the game is over as soon as someone scores 10 points. But the nice part about about this one is it's a lot easier to kind of keep things a little bit closer to your chest so that people don't pile onto the king just like they do in Catan. There's a little bit of engine building in there where you have to build up your resources so that you have the right ones to do the actions that you want to do. So I liked that strategic component of it, but everything else felt really familiar, especially if you play Catan a lot. Just like in Catan, you're racing to build your stuff on places because there are limited locations available, and some locations are going to be better for others and better for certain players, so you really have to be paying attention to what's going on around the table in order to win this one. I also really liked how the espionage cards added a little bit of a twist into the game. They felt like development cards in Catan, but with even more powerful effects. I mean, you can uncover some tactical nukes, which you definitely can't do in Catan, so there's that. But even though these espionage cards can be a little bit combative, the game didn't feel too mean because most of the times actions were taken against a player, it was because a specific player had an agenda that would help them with their endgame, rather than just being spiteful. That's one of the things I hate the most about Catan. I mean, it can be very vengeful and kingmakey, but in For All Mankind, the lines are a little bit more blurry, so it's hard to know who's ahead and who can make that play that can get them a bunch of points and win them the game. In fact, when I played, I managed to get 3 points on a single turn, so I went from 7 to 10 and just ended the game right there. And the fact that you can strategically plan that ahead of time felt really rewarding. All in all, I thought For All Mankind was surprisingly fun, and it's got this really nice production as well, where the planets are on this board that's rotating every turn. I just think it's really fun and pretty easy to get into. It's got all of the things that you like about Catan, but I think it improves on them just enough where I would much rather play this game than the original Catan. And all those Catan purists that are going to come for me in the comments, just give this one a try. Let me know what you think. I know it's never going to have the global impact that Catan has, certainly, but I definitely think it's worth you checking out. So if a game of Catan is starting to tear your friend group apart and you want to try something new that is maybe a little bit less mean but just as strategic and super fun to get into, then might I suggest For All Mankind. Alright, the next one we're going to be talking about is the game of Risk. Now, I used to play a lot of Lord of the Rings Risk growing up, so I definitely prefer my dudes on a map experience to be thematic. And so when I played this game, I thought, you know what, this is way better than Risk because I feel invested in all of the units that I have on the field. The game itself, of course, is Star Wars Battle of Hoth. Star Wars Battle of Hoth is a tactical miniature game for 2 to 4 players from Days of Wonder. And if you've ever played Memoir 44, then you've played this game. It uses the same card system and the same mechanics, so if you're a fan of that series, then just go ahead and get this one because you're going to love it. But even if you haven't played Memoir 44, I think there's still room to enjoy this one, especially as a replacement for Risk, because it is so much easier and so much quicker to get into. Basically, in the Memoir 44 system, all you're doing is taking these cards that you have in your hand and playing them to maneuver your units around the battlefield. You usually have a scenario where you have a starting position with a certain amount of units, and each of those units might have some special ability. In the first scenario, we played as the Rebellion, and so we had some snowtroopers and some snow speeders around that each had different stats and different ranges and different abilities. On the flip side, we were playing against the Empire, and they had things like AT-ATs and probe droids and things like that. Very, very thematic, but also really intuitive, so they were really easy to understand. Now, what I like about this game is that it's limiting in a good way. I feel like in Risk, there's so many different decisions that you can make, and then you get to combat and you just have to roll the dice and see what happens. In this one, there's definitely more strategy because you know exactly how far each unit can move, and you just have to weigh the opportunity cost of putting units in a certain location versus maneuvering them around and using terrain and things like that. So I just think as a tactical military style game, this one totally blows Risk out of the park. I also think that now that it has this Star Wars skin over it, it really appeals to players that wouldn't necessarily have picked up a Memoir 44 like World War II themed game. I mean, personally, a military theme doesn't really do it for me, but I'm a big Star Wars fan, just the same way that I was a Lord of the Rings fan, and that got me to play Risk. So I think the theming really does it justice, and it feels really thematic to each of the different factions. Now, the first time that I played this one, I played it at 3, and I will say it did feel maybe a little bit tougher for the team of 2 versus the team of 1. I think this is kind of like a 1v1 type situation elimination or 2v2, but I think in those situations it really shines, and I was surprised at how quickly everything happened. All of the cards are very simple, and it's just read the card and do what it says, so you just have to figure out what options are available to you on your turn, and what's the best move that you can make at that specific time. Some may complain about the simplicity of this system, but personally I think it's fantastic, and I think that's the reason why I would highly recommend this one over Risk any day. So if you like to have those miniatures on the map, you like that strategic conquest over your opponent, but you don't want to get into the random dice rolls and the crazy day-long play times of Risk, then might I suggest Star Wars Battle of Hoth. Alright, the next recommendation comes from me seeing this game at every single bar that I go to. It's Jenga, right? You know, you've seen those giant Jenga sets, the mini Jenga sets, they have a Godzilla Jenga set, they got all kinds of Jenga sets, but everybody's got a copy of Jenga, and I don't think you need a copy of Jenga. What I think you need is a copy of Nekojima. Nekojima is a really wild dexterity game for 1 to 5 players from unfriendly games, and frankly, the only reason I need to convince you to get this over Jenga is that it's got cats in it. In Nekojima, you're going to be placing these power lines on the island. You'll roll a die at the beginning of the turn, and it'll tell you which quadrant of the circle that you'll need to place the bases in, and then all you have to do is hang this power line on the board so that it doesn't touch anything else. But each turn, you're also going to be drawing cubes out of the bag, and sometimes you get a black cube, and that black cube means you have to place a cat. You got to take one of these kitties and hang them from the power line from their tails. Trust me, they love it. But it is way harder than you think. Play will keep going around the table until someone knocks the tower over, and then you all laugh and joke, and then you play another round. It's fantastic. One of the things I love the most about Nekojima is that it's got a cooperative and a competitive mode. You can challenge your friends and try to get them into the most difficult situations possible, or you can work together with the people on the table to try to build your tower as high as you can. I think games that have both of these options are fantastic because it means they can get to the table more often because they fit more people's interests. Personally, I have a lot of friends that are non-combative, so cooperative mode is always a plus. And while this game did come out a couple years ago, the reason why I'm talking about it now is because they're coming out with a new expansion that has these Torii gates in it that first of all looks amazing, but second of all looks like it adds some really interesting strategy and new dexterity challenges to the game. This game is always a hit. It looks fantastic on the table. Everyone is always looking around being like, what are they playing? Wow, that's really interesting. So if you're tired of playing drinking Jenga at your friend's house and making a huge scene when everything falls over and it makes the loudest sound possible, or if you're just looking for something fun and cozy to play with your friends while you have a glass of wine, then might I suggest Nekojima. Alright, the next one we're talking about is Clue, and this one I could have a million different recommendations for, especially because I love deduction games. I mean, you could always go with the classic Mysterium, you could go with any of those escape room games. I particularly love the post-curious kind of escape room experiences. If you haven't checked out the Emerald Flame or any of their other titles, you should definitely check them out. But I think the game that I'm going to talk about today is actually kind of Clue in a more party game sense. Everybody loves solving a mystery, but not everybody wants to sit down and roll the dice and hope they make it into the rooms that they want to make it into to get the information that they need. Right? We want Clue to be a little bit snappier. So for today's suggestion, I'm going to recommend Dying Message. Dying Message is a party-style deduction game for 3 to 8 players from Oink Games, and for a game that kind of has a heavy theme, it actually can get very goofy. In Dying Message, you'll take turns being the murder victim, indicated by this hilarious red felt pool of blood that comes in the box. First of all, I want to say I think it's hilarious that Oink Games broke their box size convention just to make sure that this pool of blood was in the production. I love the commitment to the bit, and I think that's one of the reasons that makes this game so good. Anyways, in the game, one person is suspiciously murdered, and there are 5 suspects that the rest of the table has to narrow down in order to find the true killer. But lucky for them, the murder player managed to leave them one last message by writing something with their finger in a pool of blood, which hopefully will give them the clues that they need in order to pick the correct suspect. Now, the murder player has a selection of these random abstract kind of like glyph cards that have all kind of different shapes on them, and their goal is to arrange those cards in whatever way that they see fit in order to point the blame onto the correct suspect. As the murder victim, I love this part of the game because it really gave a lot of creativity. You can layer cards on top of each other, you can try to combine different lines and shapes based on how you lay out the cards, and most importantly, at the end, when you lay down your head on the pool of blood, you can point to a card that is maybe the most important or that you want as a point of emphasis. games with all these different creative ways to get your point across. I thought it was really fun. It kind of felt like a mix of charades and Pictionary, but you didn't actually have to draw anything. You just had to be creative with the way that you arrange your cards. And then once you've decided what your final message is going to look like, everybody comes back to the table, looks at it, and discusses amongst themselves, picks a suspect, and hopefully they pick the right one, and you win. Then everybody can take a turn being the murder victim. It's super fun to just go around the table and everybody else can kind of have a conversation and just chill out. It's a perfect game for a party that's kind of just for people to hang out and you happen to be playing a game there. And I love that because I'm always trying to sneak a game into the function. Just like so many different Oink games, Dying Message is easy to pick up. I think it has a sort of novelty that gets people excited about it. And the concept is so simple that anyone can learn it. So if you want to have kind of like a murder mystery night type situation, but you don't want to spend your whole night playing Clue, or if you're just looking for a game that can kind of surprise non-gamers and get them on the road to playing something else, then might I suggest Dying Message. Alright, we're at number 6, so I think it's time we talk about some word games. I grew up with lots of word games like Scrabble, Boggle, Upwords, and all that, but I think recently there's been a slew of word games that have really impressed me and have definitely replaced the originals in my collection. I could easily slot Typeset by DVC Games in here, or even First Class Letters, which is a new one from Gamehead, but I think the one that I'm going to recommend for this replacement category is Wordsy. Wordsy is a really interesting spelling and word game for 1 to 6 players from Allplay. And even though it came out originally in 2017, Allplay has recently picked it up and brought it back to print, and I was so excited for that because I loved the original, and this one is just as good. In Wordsy, you don't need to know a bunch of words, you just need to know the right word. Every round there's going to be a market row of basically 8 consonants that you get to choose from. The further along the row they are, the more points they're worth if you use them in your word. Your goal is to try to use as many of those consonants in a single word as you can to score the most points at the end of the round. So really you just need to keep arranging and rearranging those letters in your brain until you come up with the perfect word. But you don't have all day to do it. There's this really interesting mechanic where basically as soon as someone finishes their word, they can flip over a timer, which puts pressure on everybody else to come up with something. But don't worry, over the 7 rounds you get to throw out 2 words that scored the least amount of points, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. If you like word games, you're gonna love this game because it really scratches your brain in the right way, and it forces you to come up with a word and then keep trying to see if you can get a better one each time. Plus the market refreshes each round, which means you know half of the letters that are going to be in the next round too. So if you're smart, you can think ahead and try to figure out ways you can piece those letters together with the new consonants that come up. I just think Wordsy is such a clever take on a word game. I mean, you can use any other letters or vowels that you want, as long as you come up with one perfect word at the end of the round. Anyways, Wordsy rules, and it's been out of print for a long time, so I'm just so glad that Allplay is bringing it back, because I can't wait for more people to experience this one. So if you're tired of your classic Scrabble or Boggle, or if you just want a new challenge when it comes to word games, then might I suggest Wordsy. Alright, for the last one we're talking about today, I had to dig in the vault for some classic trick-taking games. Personally, I grew up in the Midwest with Hearts and with Euchre, and to me, these games are just as classic as something like Monopoly that came in a box. But there have been a lot of trick-taking games recently that have taken it to the next level, and I think this one, out of all of them, is my favorite. It's No Loose Ends. No Loose Ends is a clever twist on a trick-taking game for 2 to 5 players from Gamehead, and I had to know that this one was going to be good when I found out that it was designed by Taiki Shinzawa, the Japanese goat of trick-taking games. In No Loose Ends, you're going to be playing as criminals who are trying to cover up your evidence that you left at the scene of the crime. If you manage to do that without a hitch, then you commit the perfect crime and you get a bunch of bonus points for it. But if you leave some things there, or your cover-up doesn't exactly work, then you'll have to try better next round. The interesting thing about this game is that the mechanics are very simple when it comes to trick-taking. You've got one suit, like Hearts, that's trump all the time. Everyone plays a card into the trick and the highest value takes it, just like a regular trick-taking game. But the twist in it comes from the bidding part of the game, which I love. Just like in games like Euchre, you have to make a bid at the beginning of the round to say how many tricks you think you're going to win. But the bidding in this game is really where the strategy comes in. Every time you bid, you have to take a card from your hand and place it in front of you. That card obviously has a suit and a number associated with it, and this will come into play later. The other thing that you're doing is you're reducing the amount of cards that you have in your hand, which reduces the amount of options that you have to play, especially later in the round. So you have to be really smart about what you get rid of and why. Now, just putting your bids out there isn't enough. Those bids represent the evidence that you've left at the scene of the crime, and you need to cover up those those bids in order to commit the perfect crime. So in order to do that, you'll have to win a couple of tricks. That seems easy, right? But wait, you don't just have to win a trick, you have to win a trick that matches either the number or the suit of the bid that you place down. This very minor twist adds such an element of strategy to the game that I just can't get enough of it. You either have to win a trick with a specific value card, or you have to win a trick that was led with the suit that you need. And so you have to be really smart about when you play your trump, when you get rid of your cards, when you short suit yourself, when you long suit yourself, and everything in between. And I think as a fan of trick-taking games, this one just blew my mind. I loved all the interplay. I even love the shoot the moon mechanic where you can snitch and try to take 0 tricks in a round. And if you do it, you get a huge bonus and you prevent other people from getting their bonuses too. It's very rare that you find a trick-taking game that both fulfills you mechanically and thematically, but I think No Loose Ends does a fantastic job, and I have been showing this to all my trick-taking friends because it is just that good. So if you're tired of playing Hearts on your Microsoft 98 machine and you want a new twist on trick-taking that feels both fresh and familiar at the same time, then might I suggest No Loose Ends. Thanks for sticking around for my list of 7 games that are better than the classics. But now I want to hear what you think. Let me know what your replacements for these 7 games would be down in the comments, or if there's any other classic games that you're looking for replacements for, you can add that too. Anyways, thanks to everyone who supported this channel so far. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep growing this channel and keep helping you find your perfect board game. Once again, this has been a Might I Suggest a Game production, and I'm Alex, your board game sommelier, signing off.